The security cameras at Morton's Diner captured everything. What happened that cold November evening in Richmond, Virginia, would shake the foundations of justice itself. Federal agent Derek Whitmore, 28 years old, walked into the diner with the swagger of someone who believed himself untouchable. His credentials hung around his neck like a shield of invincibility. He had just finished his shift and was hungry, impatient, and accustomed to getting his way. Behind the counter stood Harold Chen, a 72-year-old Korean War veteran who had owned Morton's Diner for 43 years. Harold was a fixture in the community, the man who gave free meals to homeless veterans, who remembered every regular's name, who had served his country with honor and his community with love. "I said I want my food now, old man." Derek's voice cut through the peaceful atmosphere of the diner. Harold looked up calmly from the grill. "Sir, your order will be ready in 5 minutes. I'm doing my best. Do you know who I am?" Derek slammed his federal badge on the counter. "I'm a federal agent. I don't wait for anyone." The 12 customers in the diner fell silent. Cell phones came out. Recording began. What happened next would be viewed millions of times online. Derek reached across the counter and grabbed Harold's shirt collar. "Listen to me, you." Harold tried to step back, but Derek yanked him forward violently. The elderly veteran's head struck the edge of the metal counter with a sickening crack. Harold collapsed to the floor, blood pooling beneath his silver hair. "Oh my God!" a customer screamed. Derek looked around at the horrified faces, at the phones recording his every move. For a moment, something flickered in his eyes. Fear, perhaps, or the first hint of realization. But arrogance won out. "He slipped," Derek said coldly. "You all saw it. The old man slipped." But they hadn't seen that. They had seen an assault. They had seen a federal agent brutalize an elderly veteran over a hamburger order. Derek flashed his badge again. "I'm a federal agent. This incident is under federal jurisdiction. Delete those videos. Now." No one moved. Paramedics arrived within minutes. Harold Chen was rushed to Richmond General Hospital with a severe concussion, fractured skull, and brain trauma. Doctors said he was lucky to be alive. The videos went viral within hours. The hashtag Justice for Harold trended nationwide. Vigils were held outside Morton's Diner. Veterans groups demanded accountability. The story dominated every news cycle. Federal prosecutors had no choice but to act. Derek Whitmore was arrested and charged with aggravated assault, abuse of power, and civil rights violations. But Derek wasn't worried. His father was Thomas Whitmore, the powerful chief of the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center, a man with connections that reached the highest levels of government. Derek had made calls. Lawyers were hired. Strings were being pulled. "They can't touch me," Derek told his attorney confidently. "My father will handle this." The case was assigned to the United States Supreme Court due to its federal jurisdiction and unprecedented public interest. And the justice who would preside was Clarence Thomas, a man known for his unwavering commitment to the Constitution, his stern demeanor, and his own history of rising from poverty to the highest court in the land. The trial date was set. America waited. Outside the hospital, Harold Chen's daughter spoke to reporters, tears streaming down her face. "My father gave everything for this country. He served with honor. And now he's fighting for his life because someone thought they were above the law." The nation's eyes turned toward Washington, D.C. But an unexpected revelation was about to change everything in the courtroom. The Supreme Court chamber had never felt so heavy. Every seat in the gallery was filled. Reporters lined the walls. Veterans in uniform sat shoulder to shoulder, their medals gleaming under the courtroom lights. At precisely 10 a.m., Justice Clarence Thomas entered through the mahogany doors behind the bench. At 77 years old, he carried himself with the quiet dignity of a man who had spent decades interpreting the highest laws of the land. His expression was unreadable, his gaze sharp. "All rise," the bailiff announced. The room stood as one. Justice Thomas took his seat at the center of the bench. He looked out across the courtroom with those penetrating eyes that had witnessed countless cases, countless injustices, countless moments where the law met humanity. "Be seated," he said, his deep voice filling every corner of the room. "We will proceed with the case of United States versus Derek James Whitmore." The doors opened, and Derek Whitmore entered. He wore an expensive tailored suit, navy blue, crisp white shirt, designer tie. His hair was perfectly styled. He walked with his shoulders back, chin up, a smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. This was not the posture of a man facing serious federal charges. This was the posture of someone who believed the fix was in. Derek took his seat at the defendant's table, leaning back casually as if he were attending a business meeting rather than a trial that could send him to federal prison. Justice Thomas observed this display without expression. But those who knew him could see the slight narrowing of his eyes. The prosecution presented their case methodically. Security footage played on the screens, crystal clear, damning. Derek grabbing Harold Chen. The violent pull. The elderly man's head striking the counter. The blood. Gasps echoed through the gallery, though everyone had seen the footage before. Seeing it in this sacred space made it more real, more terrible. Medical experts testified about Harold's injuries: skull fracture, subdural hematoma, permanent hearing loss in his left ear, ongoing cognitive issues. "Mr. Chen may never fully recover," the neurologist testified. "The trauma to his brain at his age. The prognosis is uncertain." Then it was the defense's turn. Derek's attorney stood, adjusted his expensive cufflinks, and began his statement. "Your Honor, this was an unfortunate accident. My client, a decorated federal agent who has served his country with distinction, reached out to steady Mr. Chen, who appeared unsteady. The contact was unintentional. The injury, while regrettable, was accidental." Murmurs of disbelief rippled through the courtroom. Justice Thomas raised his hand. Silence fell immediately. "The video evidence appears to contradict that assertion, Counselor." "Your Honor, perspective can be deceiving. Federal Agent Whitmore has an impeccable record. I will hear from Mr. Whitmore himself," Justice Thomas interrupted. "Approach the witness stand." Derek stood, buttoning his suit jacket with deliberate slowness. He walked to the witness stand with that same arrogant swagger, placed his hand on the Bible, and took the oath. As he sat down, he actually winked at someone in the gallery. Justice Thomas leaned forward. "Mr. Whitmore, do you understand the severity of the charges against you?" "I do, Your Honor," Derek said with practiced sincerity that fooled no one. "But I believe there's been a terrible misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding?" "Yes, sir. I was having a difficult day. Mr. Chen seemed confused about my order. I reached out to get his attention, and unfortunately, he lost his balance." "You grabbed him by the collar and pulled him into a metal counter." Derek shrugged, actually shrugged in the Supreme Court. "It looks worse on camera than it was." A wave of outrage swept through the gallery. Veterans stood up, shouting. The bailiff called for order. Justice Thomas's jaw tightened. Mr. Whitmore, a 72-year-old veteran, suffered life-threatening injuries. "You show no remorse." "I feel bad that he got hurt, obviously," Derek said with hollow insincerity. "But I'm a federal agent. I deal with high-stress situations every day. Sometimes things happen. The old guy should have just gotten my order right." The gasps were audible. "The old guy," Justice Thomas repeated slowly, his voice dropping to a dangerous quiet. "I mean, Mr. Chen." "Whatever." Derek leaned back in his chair. "Look, Your Honor, I'm sure we can work something out. Community service, maybe a fine. My record speaks for itself." This is being blown way out of proportion. Harold Chen was helped to the witness stand next. He moved slowly, still recovering, his daughter supporting his arm. A visible scar marked his temple where his head had struck the counter. Harold sat down with difficulty. His hands trembled slightly, a side effect of the brain trauma. The prosecutor approached gently. "Mr. Chen, can you tell us what happened that evening?" Harold's voice was soft but steady. "I was making his food. He got angry. He grabbed me. I remember pain, and then nothing until I woke up in the hospital." "What would you like to say to the defendant?" Harold looked directly at Derek for the first time. There was no anger in his eyes, only profound sadness. "I served my country for 3 years in Korea. I watched friends die. I came home and built a life serving my community. I never asked for special treatment. I just wanted to live with dignity." His voice cracked. "And he took that from me because he couldn't wait 5 minutes for a hamburger." Derek rolled his eyes, a gesture so brazen, so utterly devoid of humanity, that several people in the gallery stood up in protest. Justice Thomas's expression hardened into something carved from stone. Mr. Whitmore returned to the stand. Derek sauntered back, still smirking. "Do you have anything to say to Mr. Chen?" "I already said I'm sorry he got hurt." "That's not what I asked. Do you have anything to say to a man who served his country, who has served his community for over 4 decades, whose life you have forever altered?" Derek sighed dramatically. "Look, Your Honor, with all due respect, I'm a federal agent. I serve my country too. I protect this nation every single day. So this hero veteran stuff—" "Finish that sentence at your peril," Justice Thomas warned, his voice like thunder. Derek caught himself, but the damage was done. Justice Thomas sat back in his chair, steepling his fingers. The courtroom was silent enough to hear a pin drop. "I have presided over thousands of cases in my career," he said slowly. "I have seen defendants who showed remorse. I have seen defendants who showed anger. I have seen defendants who showed fear. But rarely, very rarely, have I seen such complete and utter absence of human decency." Derek's smirk finally began to fade. "You stand before this court not as a victim of circumstances, but as a perpetrator of senseless violence. You hide behind your badge as if it grants you immunity from basic human morality. You mock a man who has given more to this country than you could possibly comprehend." Justice Thomas's gaze swept across the courtroom and landed on the back row. "And I wonder if the person who raised you understands what you have become." Derek shifted uncomfortably for the first time. The courtroom doors creaked open, and then someone stood up in the back of the tribunal. Every head turned. A man stood in the last row of the gallery, partially hidden in the shadows. He was in his late 50s, tall and broad-shouldered, wearing the formal uniform of the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center. On his chest gleamed the insignia of the chief director. His face was weathered, lined with the weight of decades of service and, at this moment, profound grief. Thomas Whitmore had been sitting in the back of the Supreme Court for the entire trial, watching his son, hearing every callous word, seeing every arrogant gesture. "Chief Director Whitmore," Justice Thomas said, his voice cutting through the stunned silence, "would you approach the bench?" Derek's face went pale. His swagger evaporated. "Dad? What are you?" "Sit down, Derek," his father said quietly, but with such command that Derek immediately complied. Thomas Whitmore walked down the center aisle of the Supreme Court. His footsteps echoed in the absolute silence. Veterans in the gallery sat straighter as he passed, recognizing a man who had spent his entire life in law enforcement. He stopped before Justice Thomas and stood at attention. "Your Honor, Chief Director Whitmore, I understand you have something you wish to say to this court." Thomas Whitmore's jaw clenched. His eyes, the same color as his son's but filled with something Derek's lacked entirely. Conscience swept across the courtroom before landing on Derek. "I do, Your Honor." Justice Thomas nodded. "You may speak." Thomas turned to face the gallery, to face the cameras, to face the nation. "My name is Thomas Whitmore. I am the Chief Director of the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center. I have served in law enforcement for 34 years. I have trained thousands of agents. I have dedicated my entire life to upholding the law, to protecting the innocent, to ensuring that justice is not just a word but a living reality." His voice cracked slightly. "And I have failed." Derek's head snapped up. "Dad, don't." "Be silent," Thomas said without looking at him. He turned back to Justice Thomas. "Your Honor, I have watched this trial from the back of this courtroom. I have heard the evidence. I have seen the video. And most painfully, I have witnessed my son's complete lack of remorse, his contempt for a man who deserves nothing but respect, his belief that his badge places him above accountability." Thomas's hands clenched into fists at his sides. "I raised him alone after his mother passed when he was 12. I worked long hours. I provided for him. I gave him opportunities. I pulled strings to get him into the academy. I thought I was helping him, building his future." He looked at Derek now, and there were tears in his eyes. "But I see now that I didn't build his character. I built his arrogance. Every time he made a mistake, I fixed it. Every time he showed disrespect, I made excuses. Every time he should have faced consequences, I shielded him. And I created this." "Dad, please," Derek whispered, his own eyes beginning to water. "I created someone who believes the rules don't apply to him," Thomas continued, his voice growing stronger. "Someone who would assault an elderly veteran over a hamburger and feel entitled to walk away. Someone who doesn't understand the meaning of honor, service, or basic human decency." He turned to Harold Chen, who sat in the front row. "Mr. Chen, I cannot undo what my son did to you. I cannot give you back the sense of safety he took from you. I cannot heal your injuries. But I can tell you this, I am ashamed. I am deeply, profoundly ashamed. You served your country with honor. You served your community with love. And my son repaid that with violence." Thomas's voice broke. "I am so sorry." Harold Chen, despite everything, nodded with grace. Thomas turned back to Justice Thomas. "Your Honor, I came here today prepared to do what I have always done, protect my son. I had lawyers ready. I had favors to call in. I had plans to ensure he would walk away from this with minimal consequences." The courtroom held its collective breath. "But I cannot do that. I will not do that. Because if I do, I will have failed him one final time. I will have confirmed his belief that he is above the law. And I will have dishonored everything I have spent my life fighting for." Derek stood up. "Dad, what are you saying?" Thomas looked at his son with infinite sadness and infinite love. "I'm saying that I love you too much to save you from yourself." He turned to Justice Thomas. "Your Honor, I am here to ask that you show my son no leniency because of who I am or what position I hold. I am here to ask that you apply the full weight of the law. Derek needs to learn what I failed to teach him, that actions have consequences, that badges do not grant immunity from justice, and that true honor comes from taking responsibility, not avoiding it." Justice Thomas regarded the father with something that might have been respect. "You understand what you're asking?" "I do, Your Honor. And I'm asking you to do what I should have done years ago. Hold him accountable." Derek collapsed back into his chair, his face in his hands. His shoulders shook. The arrogance was gone. The swagger had disappeared. For the first time since the trial began, Derek Whitmore looked like what he was, a young man who had made a terrible mistake and was finally understanding the weight of it. Thomas Whitmore stood before the bench, tears streaming down his weathered face. "I will add one more thing, Your Honor. Whatever sentence you impose, I will ensure Derek faces additional consequences. I am removing him from my will. I am cutting off his financial support. When he leaves prison, and I pray he does, he will have to rebuild his life from the ground up, the way I did, the way Mr. Chen did, the way every person who has truly earned their place in this world has done." He looked at his son one last time. "Because that's what real love looks like. Not protection from consequences, but the courage to let someone face them so they can become who they're meant to be." The courtroom was silent except for the sound of Derek's quiet sobbing. Justice Thomas nodded slowly. "Chief Director Whitmore, you may return to your seat. This court will take a brief recess before sentencing." As Thomas walked back up the aisle, something remarkable happened. One by one, the veterans in the gallery stood. They didn't applaud. They didn't speak. They simply stood in silent acknowledgement of a father who had chosen justice over protection, truth over comfort, love over enabling. Thomas Whitmore sat down in the back row and put his face in his hands. And Derek Whitmore, alone at the defendant's table, finally understood the true meaning of consequence. Justice Clarence Thomas returned to the bench exactly 15 minutes later. The courtroom, which had been buzzing with whispered conversations, fell silent the moment he appeared. Derek Whitmore stood at the defendant's table. Gone was the expensive suit swagger. His shoulders were hunched. His eyes were red. For the first time in his life, he looked small. Mr. Whitmore approached the bench for sentencing. Derek walked forward on unsteady legs. He stood before the most powerful judicial authority in the nation, a man who had risen from poverty in Pinpoint, Georgia, who had faced discrimination and hardship, who had climbed to the Supreme Court through sheer determination and unwavering principle. Justice Thomas looked down at the young man before him. "Derek James Whitmore, you have been found guilty of aggravated assault, abuse of federal authority, and civil rights violations. Before I pronounce sentence, I want to ensure you understand something." Derek nodded, unable to speak. "The badge you wear, the authority you have been granted, is not a weapon. It is a responsibility. It is a sacred trust given to you by the people of this nation, who expect that you will use it to protect the vulnerable, uphold the law, and serve with honor. You did none of those things." Justice Thomas paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "You assaulted a 72-year-old veteran, a man who served in Korea while you weren't even born, a man who has spent 43 years serving his community with dignity and grace. And you did it because you couldn't wait 5 minutes for a hamburger." Derek's tears fell openly now. "Your actions have consequences, Mr. Whitmore. Not just for you, but for every federal agent who wears that badge with honor. You have undermined public trust. You have dishonored your oath. And you have inflicted permanent harm on a man who deserved your respect." Justice Thomas opened the sentencing document. "I hereby sentence you to 7 years in federal prison, with no possibility of parole for the first 4 years. You will serve this sentence in general population. No special protections, no accommodations for your former status as a federal agent." Derek's knees buckled slightly. His attorney steadied him. "Additionally, you are permanently barred from holding any position in federal, state, or local law enforcement. Your federal agent credentials are revoked, effective immediately. You will complete 2,000 hours of community service upon release, specifically serving veterans organizations and community programs for the elderly." Justice Thomas closed the folder and looked directly at Derek. "But I am going to give you something Mr. Chen has given you, despite everything you did to him. I am going to give you a chance." Derek looked up through his tears. 7 years is a long time, Mr. Whitmore. You can emerge from prison bitter and broken, or you can use this time to become the man your father hoped you would be. You can learn humility. You can develop empathy. You can discover that true strength comes not from authority or arrogance, but from character and conscience. Justice Thomas's expression softened slightly, just slightly. Your father loves you. Mr. Chen, despite everything, has shown you grace. Do not waste these gifts. Become worthy of them. The gavel fell with finality. This court is adjourned. Thomas Whitmore approached the bench after the courtroom began to clear. Justice Thomas remained seated, sorting papers. Your Honor, I wanted to thank you. Justice Thomas looked up. For what, Chief Director? For giving my son what I couldn't. The truth. The consequences he needed. You gave him those things yourself today. That took more courage than most men possess. Thomas nodded, wiping his eyes. I need to add something to the record, if the court will permit. Speak. Derek's mother, my wife Sarah, passed away from cancer when he was 12. Before she died, she made me promise to teach him about honor, about service, about being a good man. I thought I was keeping that promise by giving him opportunities. But I see now I broke it by never letting him face the natural consequences of his choices. Thomas's voice broke completely. Today, I finally kept my promise to her. And it was the hardest thing I've ever done. Justice Thomas stood and stepped down from the bench, a rare gesture of respect. Chief Director Whitmore, you did what every good father must eventually do. You loved your son enough to let him fall so he could learn to stand on his own. Sarah would be proud of you. The two men shook hands, both understanding the weight of what had transpired. Before the marshals led Derek away, Harold Chen approached the defendant's table. Derek looked up, terrified. Mr. Chen, His voice failed him. Harold Chen, this elderly veteran who had every right to hatred, who had suffered permanent injury and trauma, who had been mocked and disrespected, did something extraordinary. He extended his hand. Derek stared at it in disbelief. I forgive you, Harold said quietly. Not because what you did was acceptable. Not because the pain you caused disappears with words. But because holding on to anger would only hurt me, and you've already taken enough from me. Derek took the offered hand, sobbing. I served my country so young men like you could have freedom and opportunity, Harold continued. I opened my diner so I could serve my community. And even now, after everything, I will pray that you use these years to find the man you're supposed to be. I'm so sorry, Derek whispered. I'm so sorry. I know. Now prove it with your life. Harold turned and walked away with dignity, leaving Derek transformed by grace he didn't deserve but desperately needed. Thomas Whitmore was granted a final moment with his son before the marshals took him away. They stood in a small holding room, father and son, separated by so much more than the handcuffs Derek wore. Dad, I'm sorry. For everything. For disappointing you. For wasting everything you gave me. For... Stop, Thomas said gently. He placed his hands on Derek's shoulders. Listen to me. I love you. I have always loved you. And that's why I did what I did today. You destroyed my life. No. Thomas shook his head. I gave you a chance to build a real one. The life you were living, the arrogance, the entitlement, the cruelty, that wasn't a life. That was a disaster waiting to happen. Today was that disaster. But it's also your salvation. Derek looked at his father through tears. 7 years, son. 7 years to think, to read, to learn, to become humble, to discover empathy, to understand that real strength comes from character, not authority. Thomas pulled his son into a tight embrace. When you get out, I'll be waiting. Not with money or connections or shortcuts, but with love. And together, we'll build the life your mother wanted for you. The life you deserve. The life you'll have to earn. I'm scared, Dad. Good. Fear will keep you humble. Humility will keep you human. And humanity is what you need most. The marshals entered. It was time. As they led Derek away, Thomas called out one final time. Derek! His son turned. Make me proud. Derek nodded, and for the first time in his life, he understood what that really meant. Epilogue. 18 months later. The morning sun filtered through the windows of the Mortons' diner, casting the same warm glow it had for 44 years. Harold Chen stood at the grill, moving a bit slower than before, but moving nonetheless. The door chimed. Harold looked up and froze. Derek Whitmore stood in the doorway. He wore simple work clothes, jeans, a plain t-shirt, work boots. His hair was shorter. His face was thinner. His eyes were different, clearer, sadder, wiser. He had been released early for exemplary behavior and was now on supervised release, working construction and attending counseling. Mr. Chen, Derek said quietly, I know I'm probably the last person you want to see, but I needed to tell you something. Harold set down his spatula, his hand trembling slightly, not from fear, but from emotion. Every single day in prison, I thought about what I did to you. Every morning when I woke up in that cell, I saw your face. I saw you falling. I saw the blood. And I felt the full weight of what I'd done. Derek's voice cracked. I can't undo it. I can't give you back what I took. But I can tell you that I'm not that person anymore. I'm trying every day to become someone who deserves the forgiveness you gave me. Harold studied the young man before him. Prison had stripped away the arrogance, the entitlement, the cruelty. What remained was raw, broken, and real. What are you doing now? Harold asked. I work construction. I volunteer at the VA hospital on weekends, helping veterans. I'm trying to learn what service really means. Harold nodded slowly. Then he did something that shocked everyone in the diner. He walked around the counter and extended his hand. Welcome back, Derek. Derek took the hand, tears streaming down his face. Thank you. Thank you for showing me what grace looks like. Don't thank me. Honor it. Live it. Become it. Derek nodded. I will. I promise. As Derek turned to leave, Harold called out. Derek. Yes, sir. We open at 6 a.m. If you ever want to learn how to make a proper hamburger, you're welcome to come help. Minimum wage, hard work, and you'll have to earn every bit of respect. Derek smiled, a real smile, humble and grateful. I'd like that, Mr. Chen. I'd like that very much. 6 months later, Derek Whitmore stood before a community center filled with at-risk youth. Thomas Whitmore sat in the back row, watching his son with pride. My name is Derek, he began, and I'm here to tell you about the worst mistake I ever made and how it saved my life. He told them everything. The arrogance, the assault, the trial, his father's choice, the prison years, the transformation. I thought power came from a badge and authority, Derek said. But real power comes from character. Real strength comes from admitting when you're wrong. Real honor comes from serving others, not dominating them. He looked directly at the young faces before him. Don't be who I was. Be who Mr. Chan is. Be who my father is. Be someone who leaves the world better than they found it. After the speech, a young man approached Derek. Do you regret what happened? Derek thought carefully. I regret the pain I caused. I regret the man I was. But I don't regret the consequences, because they made me face the truth and gave me a chance to become who I'm supposed to be. Thomas Whitmore walked over and placed his hand on his son's shoulder. Sarah would be proud, he said quietly. Derek smiled. I hope so, Dad. I'm trying. I know. And that's all anyone can ask.